So I went to breakfast this morning, right? And they had the TV, whatever. So MSNBC was talking about how affirmative action, well, the Supreme Court is going to hear it in the fall.
So that'll probably be the beginning of their new.
I think this year. I'm guessing this fall of this year, because why would they talk about fall of next year?
Well, I mean, the session ended now, so this would be their next. This would be the beginning of their new session.
Yeah, so they're going to hear it in the fall for affirmative action, and they were talking about how tied to it there'll be elimination of legacy emissions.
But that's not really affirmative action.
Well, it's
that actually helps all the elites.
Schools.
Right. So like legacy, like say.
I know. Let me finish. Okay. I know. I'm not saying it's tied to it. They were just talking about it in retrospect with affirmative action and everything going on. So, well, before we go further.
So basically, just overall preferential emissions is being.
Well, they said, yeah, basically, might as well say that
because legacy and affirmative action are two different.
Well, I couldn't. It was muted, so I'm just going by what's on the prompts. So
legacy emissions like your father and his father and so forth.
But they were adding that. So they were just adding that along with along with affirmative action. A lot of schools are getting rid of legacy emissions. Well, the Department of Education is starting to look at legacy emissions, and that's starting to go away. And particularly, I think MIT stopped doing it. Hopkins, either these schools stopped or they're going to stop. And they were the elite schools like Hopkins, MIT. I can't remember everything else on the list, but I think Howard's talking about not stopping to do it. Morehouse going to probably stop doing it.
Bar the Ivies, because most of their funding comes from the alumni who are legacies who expect their children to likewise be able to get into those schools. So that's going to be a hard battle going forward.
I mean, I'm interested to see
because a lot of them base their funding around alumni who then want their children to get into those schools as well.
Basically just a legal bribe.
And it is. But if you cut off these people's legacy emissions,
they have no incentive for funding these schools.
It's going to give them less incentive to further fund the schools. They further fund the schools on the
strength you're going to let their kid
in. Yeah. So.
And like I said, I'm not against. So it's a double-edged sword. Like I personally.
I'll say this, so I'm not against legacy emissions, but I am against the thing where you give a huge donation to the school and then your kid gets in. Those are two different things. So like you suddenly fund the library and it's named in your honor and lo and behold your kid gets into the school.
I mean
that's a legal bribe. Legacy emissions is more like, his father, his grandfather, his great grandfather all one day.
If you qualify,
so their legacy.
Yeah,
but usually they still got to qualify. But it's just like, with a limited enrollment, they get picked first. So.
I know, I get that, and that's what I'm saying. Like I'm guessing playing devil's advocate here. From the outside, on my standpoint, it still looks like either way it's a legal bribe. Like, yeah, your dad, your pappy, your father, and all these people went, and they're still giving money. But you can still get in, even though if you don't qualify, even though there's somebody else whose grades are way better than yours who qualifies, but because, this person went, and they give money, you get in.
Well, that's a problem with the American university system in general, because it's not just based on your grades and standardized testing, because a lot of people think that those are biases against minority groups that tend to have less stellar GPAs and standardized testing scores, so they will also base it on stuff like community service, where you went to school, and like they basically do this whole analysis based on those sort of things. Whereas overseas, they don't go through all that bullshit. It's basically just your GPA and your standardized testing scores.
If you got the money to afford school.
No, that of course, but I mean, basically, like they're
not just college. I'm talking about grade school as well.
I'm just saying their metric isn't based on all these other sort of.
It's based on it's a meritocracy.
Non-quantitative aspects. It's basically just your scores and your GPA. That's
if you're good enough or not, and I get that. And it's crazy if we try to say, well, I get what you're saying, and if we try to say, well, this type of system hurts minorities, then I would make the argument, well, like you said, it is an issue with the whole education system, because the education system in itself creates the problems for minorities, education that causes them to have these educational issues to compete with everybody else. It's just the American education system is just bullshit. It's just it's a what's the thing? It's like a not a homunculus. What is it called? The thing that devours itself.
Divides itself.
No, devours itself. Or it's like an Ouroboros. It's just an Ouroboros. It creates a problem that keeps eating itself over and over and over again. Because it doesn't solve. And the only way to solve it would be to, me personally, give everybody the same quality education. Just like, I'm not against private schools. Well, I kind of am, but that's a different story. But the point is, just getting back on track before we get sidetracked. Yeah, that might be a thing. So affirmative action might be gone. And honestly,
well, they've already crippled it in the past. Like it was more. There was less breaks on it in the past until like they were showing how it discriminated against poor white people and Asian students who do exceedingly well in academics but are often denied enrollment in schools because they don't want the Asian students to be overrepresented in the universities, which is crazy. So it was like you're punishing people for doing the right thing and excelling. Like I mean, you know, we can get into what people think about, you know, the certain stereotypes about Asians and this and that, but I'm not gonna punish people for doing the right thing. Like you're punishing them for excelling, like saying, no, we don't need this, we only need but X amount of Asians in our schools.
No,
we don't want them, especially in the schools in California. Like a lot of them get discriminated against there because it's, you know,
it's a high Asian population.
There's a high Asian population in California, and they're overrepresented in the student population. So sometimes their enrollment is cut at a certain number in many of these universities, particularly like the University of California system. I don't know about the private schools, but a lot of the state schools in California do that, and that's messed up. Because some people don't agree with that, but then just all you gotta do is switch the race, and you will see how messed up that is. Like, what if that was black people? Like, they just like, well, there's too many black people doing well in these. We can't have all, you know, black people overrepresented in our university. If we saw how crazy, we can see how crazy that was. So, if you see, you know, then you know, extrapolate that to Asians, like, yo, that's fucked up. Like,
no, and I think it is like, so I think the problem is how the argument is typically presented. So I heard about it before, and the way they explained, that's not how they explained it. I'll put it like that. The way you explained, that's not how they explained it. They made it seem like, oh, we're just not being allowed in because of, and they didn't give no context as to what the issue was. They just said, they just blatantly said, it was some Asian girl, I can't remember her name, but basically they're basically like Asian white supremacists almost. But they're basically arguing with, well,
like the Rooftop Boys.
Yeah, something like that.
Oh, so in case you guys don't know, Rooftop Koreans are like this extreme group of Asians that started like back in like, I believe like maybe the early 90s with the riots that happened in like LA and stuff like that, where they saw their stores getting destroyed. So a lot of them banded together and bought like firearms and would literally be on the rooftops of their stores shooting at the rioters to keep them from breaking into their stores. And this became like a whole little movement in itself, where it basically represented like these extreme Asians who don't want to take shit from other groups, particularly black people, and feel that, you know, black people try to target them in these low income neighborhoods. So they have this malicious sort of attitude towards black people basically.
And while I can understand wanting to protect your store, however, it's more to the story than it didn't just start with rooftop Asians. Because if you go a little further back, like maybe the 80s, it was a Asian stores used to shoot. It was one he shot a little black girl, a child, over like $1, like in the back of the head. Mm-hmm. So the whole beef with Asian and black people, particularly I guess like store owners, it's not new, because they they were elevated by white people to excel further in society. I just don't think white people expected them to excel as much as they did. And if they did, they expected them to remain loyal to them.
Well, they allow it because they can use them as the
token
the model minority, just as a way to use them against other ethnic minorities, particularly black and Latino groups. So
true. And like I said, in most Asians, they'll hop right on board with it. But moving back to what we were talking about, no, and I agree. Like, you shouldn't be punished for excelling. Like, I'm totally against that. Like, if you are doing well, you got the grades to get in, you should get in. Now, many people say, well, if we were to do that, then black people wouldn't get in. I think that's bullshit. And the reason I call bullshit on that is because, and we have a lot of black people that are doing well despite all the laws that have been put in place, despite all the red tape and everything that's been thrown against us. We are doing all right. We have got, and particularly black men, we've gotten better than we were in the 90s. Like, we are way better, in a better spot than we were in the 90s. Why that is, that's a whole nother video, but we've gotten better. We've accomplished a lot. We made some strides. But I would never say, you shouldn't be allowed to get into college because you're overrepresented. That's stupid. That's just stupid. It just doesn't make sense. And if we're going to say, well, it's discrimination against poor white people, I'll take the heat for this. I'm sorry. I don't feel bad if a person loses who has all the cheat codes to the game. I don't. I'm sorry. White people are the only people in this country who can literally not graduate high school and become a member of Congress. Only white people can literally say do some shit like that.
I'll do you even better. There's stats showing that a white dropout who ends up going to prison will make more than a black college graduate.
Yeah, I remember that too. I remember that. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't feel bad about white people losing. And I know people say, that's racist. I'm like, no, it's not. Because if we switch the races and you see this black guy this black person who literally grew up in a affluent neighborhood, went to the best schools and everything, and still failed. Well, no, that's not a good one, because racism can always rear its ugly head and make him fail. Yeah, I'm sorry. Nah, I can't. There's no way around it. You have all the cheat codes in this society. You literally can walk outside and pick a job, and odds are you'll get it. Even though I have a bachelor's degree, and I'm about to have a master's degree in a few months, I'll have a master's, and there'll still be a white person, less qualified, less educated, probably has a record, who will go further than I would in my field. So I don't feel bad. Like, I really don't feel bad about the poor white people. Like, bruh, you got the cheat codes to life in this country. You have no reason. Like, the only way you could fail is if you purposely chose not to do anything. And that's what most of them do.
They taking out gerbs.
like that's all it is. And I tell black people the same thing. Like, before I say, well, that's racist. No, I tell black people the same thing. Bruh, you have a computer in your pocket. If you can make TikTok videos, you can learn how to do other stuff.
Yeah, what burns me up is when people ask me a question about something that they can literally look up on their own. I'm like, dude, you have a computer literally in the palm of your hands, and you're asking me a question that you can look up for yourself. Like, that irritates the shit out of me. That's just one of my pet peeves. I don't know.
Right, but moving this back into the affirmative action thing.
And we might have to continue this, guys, because this video is getting a little long.
But yeah, and what made it the best, like, I think the best moment for me about watching the program, the news report on it, was MSNBC publicly stated that white women were the biggest beneficiaries of affirmative action.
Which I've known in the past, but...
I mean, we all have known, but the fact that a liberal news station said it.
Even Fox News can say the truth sometimes. So.
No, it wasn't Fox News. It was
I know. I'm
yeah.
just saying that even the worst.
Other worst can say the truth sometimes, but Fox News wouldn't go that hard. I don't think Fox News will go that hard.
Ironically, sometimes Fox will put on like a true progressive or liberal to give a counterpoint, whereas MSNBC or CNN will put on like a fake, like a fake progressive or something to give a different viewpoint.
Well, Fox News knows its viewership, so even put on a progressive or something, it's not gonna amount to anything. It'll just be hate watching at that point. But for me, because liberals typically don't want to acknowledge white supremacy. Like, they'll acknowledge like the overt white supremacy, the ugliness, like the Klan hood, and they'll acknowledge that, but they won't acknowledge the subtleness, like the redlining laws or
basically the northern liberal that Malcolm X talked about like 60 years ago. He said, "I'd rather face the southern racist wolf, who lets me know exactly what it is, compared to the noble liberal fox that makes me think that he's one of my allies and secretly he's out to
right.
do me in just as bad as the southern racist fox."
Pretty much, yeah.
But
And
I'm gonna wrap this up, guys. This video is getting a little too long, but we're gonna continue this. We gonna say anything?
oh no, I went to part 2.
Oh yeah. All right, guys.